What's up, fellow internet denizens? Welcome back to yet another episode of... I have had a love-hate relationship with vampire portrayal in literature, and I think it's high time I rank these vampires based on how strong they are, how unique they are, and personal bias, of course. So without further ado, let's go! Bunnicula was the first vampire novel I remember reading, aside from maybe a few picture books when I was 4. Here we have a bunny with a little widow's peak marking and red eyes. He's adopted by a loving family, but their 2 other pets, a cat and a dog, are suspicious of their new friend. Now, Bunnicula's powers are fairly simple. He bites vegetables and drains them of all of their juices and colors, and that's it. He's just a fella. While he's got some very unique abilities and an adorable appearance, it seems he's not very powerful, and unfortunately, the highest I can put him is D tier. I'm so sorry, little guy. Okay, I have only read the first 3 books in the Vampire Chronicles, but here's everything I know so far. Every vampire in the series is a sort of descendant of Enkiel and Akasha through biting, and these 2 got their power from an ancient god. Through spreading vampirism, they're actually making their powers more manageable and easy to control. Vampires in this series are basically your standard vampires, immortal unless they're burnt with a hot enough fire or a UV light. They go into a coma if they drink tainted blood or don't drink blood frequently enough. Also, their fingernails are diamond and their complexions are bright, which makes me wonder if a certain author I have yet to mention here has read these books. That would actually make my little chart thing even more tangly. I am going with A tier because this series was highly influential. Alright, let's go to a galaxy far, far away now. In A New Hope, there is a man at the cantina's counter who briefly looks towards the camera and has a sort of messed up nose. According to Tales from the Mos Eisley Cantina, this is an Onzot, or an ancient telepathic humanoid monster with retractable face tentacles who sucks blood and brains through people's noses, calling this mixture either soup or luck. They are known to crave force users in particular. They're also their own species and thus can't transmit their condition. They believe that they get stronger the more luck they consume, though that's debatable in canon. There are also some feral Onzati who kind of resemble Nosferatu that shoot ropes of blood-sucking tentacles from their chest. In the short story Soup's On, the narrator is the Onzot bounty hunter from A New Hope, Danik Jericho, and his inner monologue was insane and it creeped me the fuck out in the best of ways. Go give that story a read if you want. You're in for a treat. I'm giving this a B because while they're not technically vampires, they're still awesome. Okay, I have a confession to make. I wasn't that big on Goosebumps as a kid, but I read them if there weren't any books that I liked at the school library. I remember there was this choose your own adventure one with a poodle vampire, and that was kinda cool, I guess. There was one path you could take where you get turned, and you decide to just subsist on raw meat because blood is yucky. I don't remember much else, so I'm putting Goosebumps in D tier because these vampires seemed just really toned down. Speaking of toned down, the Bailey School Kids is what I read when the library ran out of cool things and Goosebumps. Here, we have a school with teachers who may or may not be monsters, but that's always ambiguous. One of the teachers is supposedly a vampire and is allergic to garlic, so I guess that's kind of proof enough for the kids. This annoyed me because I hate that kind of ambiguity. F tier. For all we know, Miss Jeepers is just a person. In the Harry Potter universe, there is one vampire who appears in one paragraph in book 6. He does nothing. D tier. Next. The Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel was one of the middle grade series of all time. In it, every myth kind of exists in their own unique way, having originated from Atlantis. All the gods are actually mutant immortals with weird powers. All heroes are actually immortal champions chosen by said gods, etc. Now, some of these gods are actually vampires, some of whom feed on emotions rather than blood. One of these is Skethik, the legendary teacher of Kukulkan. I think one of the main characters gets freaked out by her coming out as a vampire and starts falling to the dark side before eventually being redeemed, finding out he's a Neanderthal and his twin is adopted, and turning into the god of time travel and initiating a time loop that began the story. Yup, again, one of the middle grade stories of all time. As for the vampire quality, I'm giving it a C. Not the best, not the worst. Fablehaven was such a fun little series. In this world, monsters exist, but they're mostly restricted to nature preserves and cared for by special people who have to drink a special milk to see them. Some of the more human monsters blend in with human society. One of these more human types is called a Blix, and there are a few types of Blix. One drinks youth, for example, and another drinks your blood and can control you in your sleep using your blood. One of the latter infiltrates the nature preserve that the main kids hang around at, and I kind of forget the details because it's been years. I'm giving Blixes a C because they feel kind of toned down. In Percy Jackson, Empusei are blood-sucking flying monsters with one brass leg and one donkey leg. In the Battle of the Labyrinth, they tried to kill Percy when he was on a high school tour, and I think they appear later on. I haven't read this series in like 10 years. C tier. Discworld's vampire representation is so much better than their dragon representation. Here, vampires are a complex society with tight roles and different cliques and families. They have all of your standard powers like domination and blood-sucking, and a lot of their culture is notably performative, like vampire families having pages-long names that they have to read every time they introduce themselves, and female vampires often having to basically be sexy lampshades. Some of their culture varies though, like how some vampires drink blood while others decide to channel their bloodlust into other pursuits like coffee addiction or photography. Discworld's vampires are flamboyant, cunning, and complex, and I enjoy every time I see them on the page. S tier. If you haven't read Discworld, what are you doing? If you exist in online fandom spaces, you have most likely found at least a snippet of My Immortal floating around somewhere, whether it be live readings, Tumblr mood boards, or just quotes floating around. Basically, this is an infamous fanfic surrounded by a lot of mystery, where a scene kid's vampire self-insert falls in love with Draco Malfoy, and it's absolutely incomprehensible. Now, every single bit of vampire lore here is inconsistent except the fact that they cry blood and that they are all Satanists and therefore Slytherins, because that's how that works. Everything else about vampires here is self-contradicting gibberish. If you haven't read it, go read it. I hate to do this, but I'm putting the vampires from My Immortal in F tier. Speaking of completely incomprehensible fanfic, allow me to introduce you to My Immortal's underrated sister fic, Twilight Forbidden Fruit, The Temptation of Eudard Cullen. This is a different scene kid's vampire power trip taking place in, you guessed it, the Twilight universe. Here, vampires are your standard Twilight type, except they can also appear in dreams and talk to animals. The main character is the daughter of that blonde Volturi vampire whose name escapes me. Aro, I think? There's also a gay panda. I am not making that up. Go give it a read if you want to have a grand mal seizure. I am giving the vampires here a D tier because at least there's some type of consistency, I guess. Now let's talk about actual Twilight. This series made me stop reading vampire stories for several years, and I hate that it did that. I know it's cliche to hate on Twilight at this point, but I genuinely had a rough time reading this series. All the cool goth kids liked it, so I had to give it a shot, and it just felt so hollow. Now, hot take here, but I think the vampires are pretty good given the material. They're immortal bloodsuckers with super strength and diamond skin, hang on, and everyone has their own special power like mind reading or brief future sight. I love their hierarchy and codes of conduct. I think that's great. Now, I'm not as big of a fan of literally everything else in the series, especially the ovary thing. I am giving Twilight's vampires a B because while they are not exactly classic vampires, they're still unique and they're the only good part of those books. Empire of Fear is an alt history where Attila the Hun was actually a vampire, and now vampires rule all of Western Europe. It's a little slow and very gross at times. You see, they come from a virus from a meteor like in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, except this meteor is in Africa, and you have to then do this horrific mutilation ceremony, and then the virus will be stored in your male genetic material. Nope, I'm not making that up. From this, they can transfer the virus exactly how you think, and they are strong and have a fast healing factor and drink blood. Vampires can only be killed by beheading and burning, or drinking blood laced with plague. The story itself follows a guy trying to find a way to kill vampires consistently because his father was killed while killing a vampire. I'm giving the vampires here a C because they're really just your standard vampires with a couple of differences that I'm probably not allowed to say here. Dead Until Dark was absolutely vile. Literally, there are blood stains on my thrifted copy and then it split open when I was 90% through. I wish it was just 1 or 2 bloodstains, but there were several splotches. Like the original reader got a paper cut somewhere and decided to use that as an opportunity to customize their book. Also, I just didn't like it for a number of reasons. The top reason being the main character was just a garbage person and the romance happened way too quickly. The vampires were cool though. I like how they glowed when they used their powers. C tier. I picked up habeas corpses from my local flea market when I was bored one day. And then I was infuriated to find that it was the 3rd book in a series. It's about a guy who's got a bunch of fantastical viruses in his blood and they are slowly stealing his soul away. His ex is a vampire and he's now dating a werewolf who he can't kiss because he got hit by a silver bullet and all of those fantastical viruses imbibed that silver. Anyway, a bunch of vampires from several cultures appear in this book like Preta and Ricolaka. That's kinda cool actually. I'm just confused by everything else that's going on. Comparing this to other urban fantasies from the mid-2000s would be like comparing, I don't know, 303 to the emo Holy Trinity. It just doesn't hold up as well and comes off as a bit dated. C tier. Speaking of mid-2000s urban fantasy, vampires in the Dresden Files are sorted into several different courts, from the red vampires being your average blood-sucking sexy vampires to black vampires being the creepy Slavic kind. They all have different weaknesses. For example, red vampires are allergic to sunlight, white vampires are allergic to true love, and so on. I am giving these vampires an A tier. I liked this series a lot. I haven't read The Night Watch in a while. It's about a post-communist Russian bureau that keeps track of all sorts of mythological creatures and makes sure they don't mess with people. If I recall correctly, the first story of the book focuses on the main character trying to find a vampire by acting like a vampire. It's been a while though, and I need to reread it. Judgment reserved until I reread. I remember liking it though. You might have thought I forgot someone here, but I didn't. I have deliberately saved Dracula for last. This is the novel from which most vampire media draws at least some inspiration. Here, Count Dracula, the sorcerer/vampire, moves to England and wishes to spread his influence over there, going so far as to infect a local woman who is friends with his lawyer's wife. When I first read Dracula, it struck me as cliche, but I slowly realized it was the source of a lot of cliches, and that's why it felt so weird. It's like Dragonlance or Lord of the Rings in that sense. I love that sort of thing. Before Dracula, vampires were mostly just recently dead peasants who just made other people around them sick. But now vampires can be debonair gentlemen. They now could transform into bats and have harems. Of course, some of these new traits did not carry over into future media, such as hairy palms or turning 2D. Dracula did to vampire literature what Beowulf did to dragon literature. Obviously, for being such an inspiration, Dracula gets S. What did you guys expect? So, what are your guys' favorite literary vampires? Do you think that I should read and review Varney the Vampire or Carmilla at some point? Let me know below. I am probably not going to do another tier ranking for a while because I'd like to focus more on individual critter deep dives because I have a lot more fun with those. What do you guys think? I've been Alien Daydreamer and I am out. Bye!